Yeah, can you see the next slide?
Yeah, now I can see that. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
So as you can see, IIW India was formed in the 1966 at headquarters at Kolkata and various branches across the nation. And it is a non-profit organization with a very focused aim on dissemination of welding knowledge across all its member strength. And as you can see, we have a very good strength membership with us, with more than 4,500 plus members across the nation catering to the welding industry. And IIW India is a member society to the International Institute of Welding, which also has having an association of 57 other countries. So IIW India is our face to the International Institute of Welding. Next slide. What are the major objectives we will see with which IIW India is working? So very important objectives you can see on the slide here. IIW India is assisting the welding industry in India with regards to human resource development. It is doing this by means of technology diffusion to the industry and to the individual levels. It is very much helpful in all the industry with regards to R&D in welding. At the same time, what is important is the health and safety of the personnel and the industry in totality. So it is promoting that also. And it is having establishment of international standards of quality and safety for the overall Indian fabrication industry. So very important objectives that I see as a part of welding industry. It's very much important, and these objectives are very well covered by IIW India. Next slide. Coming to the activities, which is you can see some of these are very important, are conducting technical meetings like the one which we are having today, which is industry oriented training programs. We do organize seminars, conferences and exhibitions at branch, national and international levels. One of the important activities of IIW India is publishing the Indian Welding Journal, which is quarterly, is in collaboration with AWS, and a monthly newsletter is also available on its website, as you can see in the slide. So we request you all to kindly go through the website to know in more details about it. Next. Welding and training certification, IIW India is the ANB, authorized national body for providing the platform to all the individuals to obtain international qualifications, for example, IWE, IWT, IWS, and many more. With regards to skill development, yes, IIW India is very much providing the career opportunities, and it is by means of having some skill councils in association, for example, automotive sector skill council, capital goods sector skill council, and Indian iron and steel sector skill council. So by association of this, it is catering to the skill development across the country. Next. As we have already discussed, Indian welding journals, branch level, national level technical programs, skill development programs are its core activities, conducting AMIW exams, and also conducting national welder training and certification programs. Next. One of the important activity for the industry as IIW is offering is manufacturer certification scheme as per requirements of ISO 3834, training the trainers, arranging welder competition, both for male and female, and many more other things. Then what are the benefits of being a member? You can take advantage of several courses and examinations for improvement of your own personal career. You can acquire and disseminate knowledge in welding to the industry. Useful networking with fellow and national and international experts. You can get access to various journals, technical journals published, and you can also access to monthly technical lectures. Concessional charges, when we have some paid basis or some seminars are there, you can get concessional charges to attend the welding seminars and technical workshops. So the coming slides are just for your glance to see what are the types of membership, and for the individual. You can become a member. You can also opt to become an associate member, or even an associate or a student member is also possible for you to get associated with IIW. So these are the details which you can see on the slide. depending upon your qualification and eligibility, you can join us as a member of IIW. Next. This is the membership fees. This can be circulated to you all, or this is also available on our website. So you can go into the details and you can contact us also in case you would like to be a member for us. Next. This is something important because this is you can for the industry, you can also become our industrial corporate member as a organization itself. So we have 3 different categories of you becoming an ICM with us. So this is the slide for that details. Yeah, with that, I come to the end of this presentation. You can see our contact details of our branch office in Mumbai. And yeah, we wish you a very good technical lecture today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abhishek, for your quick updates on the activities of the IIW Bombay branch. And as discussed with, we've now got more than about 150 participants on board. So Krishnan sir, can I request you to quickly introduce our guest?
Yeah. Yeah. Good afternoon, all. It is our privilege to invite Mr. Sukamal Naskar, who is going to give a very interesting technical session today on duplex family, the welding and challenges. Sukamal is a graduate in metallurgy from IIEST Shibpur. He also did his MBA from the University of Hull, UK. He also holds an international welding engineer and European welding engineer diploma from TW UK. Almost 16 years of work experience in power plant, boiler, oil and gas offshore. He had the opportunity to work for Alstom in India, ATP in Malaysia, and also for boiler welding in Singapore, followed by Sandvik. And now he is with Exaton, which is actually part of ISA. And his current portfolio, he is the product manager for Southeast Asia. So with this short introduction, I invite Sukamal to take over the session. Sukamal, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnan. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are audible. Can I request you to kindly make your screen full screen?
Yeah, sure. Is it okay now?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks.
good to go.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Krishnan, Mr. Chinoy, Mr. Abhishek, and team IIW Mumbai branch. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak something about duplex family. Duplex is really a vast subject, and I will try to discuss as much as possible within this limited time. I know time is a constraint, but let's see.
Mr. Sukamal,
Yeah.
how would you prefer to answer the questions? I'm sure this is going to be a very intriguing session. People have already sent in some questions which I have forwarded to you. Would you like to take the presentation full on and then ask questions at the end?
That could be probably better, but if something is really people don't understand, it means you can always stop me in between and you can ask the question. I have no problem at all.
I would request all our participants to kindly put in your questions in the chat box. We will be monitoring that, and we can address it at the end together, or in between. If you could, if you had something in particular and you could mention it on the chat box, Mr. Sukamal could address it. Thanks a lot. This is just so that I don't have to disturb you in between on your phone.
No problem. No problem at all. Okay, so today we are going to discuss the topic I have chosen is the welding of duplex family and the opportunities and the challenges of that family. Why it is family? Because it will consist of starting from the lean duplex to hyper duplex, and I will explain later. So roughly, we will discuss on safety, duplex family history, the chemical compositions, the properties. Definitely welding is one of the challenging things. We'll talk about the welding, the defects or challenges on fabrication for duplex family. Then I will discuss some of the opportunities or application of the duplex material. Uh, there are several case studies actually which I have done in my career. So I have choose 2 or 3 from there. We'll make a summary and definitely a Q&A at the last, or definitely you are always welcome to stop me in between if you have some doubt. So first thing, before we start this presentation, the safety should be first. We should take care, and specifically in this COVID-19, we know that it has really make our life quite difficult. So please make sure that we are maintaining the social distancing, sanitizing our hand, and we should be safe. And India is number 3 now, and the way India numbers are growing looks like very soon it will go to number 2, unfortunately. Now, the second part of the safety is, you know, that in welding there is always a concern of safety. So there's a potential of eye damage, hearing damage, a burn, of fumes, and definitely there are so many heavy equipments are there. So we should make sure that we should protect our eyes, our health to in a top priority. Now, before we go to the topic on duplex, I'll roughly explain about the stainless steel, why we call stainless. So the terminology says stainless means there should not have any stain. So what is the mechanism of having a stainless? We need the alloy element called chromium. So what happened that this chromium, it forms the chromium oxide layers. You can see on this picture, uh, uh, 1 to 2 atomic thickness, a very fine layer of chromium oxide it forms on a material, and that does not allow further to react the material with the atmosphere. And that's how it makes a passive layer, and we get a stainless. So typically we say that to steel to be a stainless, we need minimum 12% of chromium, and definitely it could be more. So higher the chromium content is better, the anti-corrosion property. Now, this is a schematic diagram where I try to explain about the journey of the duplex family. Actually, duplex stainless steel was developed in 1933 in France by an error during melting austenitic grade, which was 18 chrome, 9% nickel, 2.5% moly, and it became 20% chromium, 8% nickel, and 2.5% moly. So the grade was developed actually by mistake, but we can see here until 1970, the grades which was melted or developed had a lot of problems with the mechanical property as well as the corrosion property, and which was not in a condition to be used. But over the time period, several engineering companies, including Sandvik, we did lot of R&D, and we developed the grades which are basically stable, which is a absolutely optimum in mechanical property as well as corrosion property. So here you can see the number of years are given and how this duplex family are categorized with lean duplex, duplex, super duplex, and hyper duplex. It's based on this PREN number. So I will later explain in details about the PRE, but this PRE stands for the pitting resistance equivalent. So what does it mean? Higher the pitting resistance number, it gives us an indication that the material have anti-corrosion property, or specifically have a resistance on the pitting corrosion. Okay, so how we define if the number is less than 30, the grades we call lean duplex. The duplex is anything below 40. From 40 to 45, we call super duplex, and anything above 45 PRN, we call as a hyper duplex. So this hyper duplex is quite a new material. I think over the last decades or less than a decade, it has been developed. And so far, this particular grade was developed by the Sandvik, a Swedish steelmaker. And recently we got the UNS number. It's called UNS 32707. Okay. So from this chart, it shows that hyper duplex have the highest number in PRN value, so which have the highest amount of the pitting resistance with compared to super duplex, duplex or lean duplex. Now super duplex is inferior in terms of pitting corrosion compared to hyper duplex, but it is superior compared to lean duplex and duplex. And duplex is inferior compared to hyper duplex or super duplex, but it is superior to lean duplex, and definitely lean duplex is the lowest grade among the duplex family. Okay, so here it is basically the commercial grades is mentioned, and is the UNS numbers are here, and the four most important alloy elements in duplex family is given. Okay, so I think the interesting thing why we are called duplex. Duplex means there's a two phases are there. So austenite and ferrite, the combination of the phase exists in this particular material in the room temperature. That's the purpose we say that is a duplex material. And stainless, definitely we can see here the chromium content all are above 12%. So the first two commercial grades, this LDX 2101 and SAF 2304. So LDX 2101, LDX. I would request that if somebody, if everyone could mute yourself. Thank you. So this LDX is 2101 is made from the Outokumpu. Is a trademark of Outokumpu, and SAF it stands for Sandvik Austenitic. I would request to moderator if you can mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Sukmal, you can unmute yourself. I have blocked on.
Okay. Is okay? Yeah.
Yeah, it's audible.
Thank you. So this SAF stands for Sandvik Austenitic Ferritic. Why austenitic ferritic? Because as I mentioned, that is a duplex stainless steel. So there's an austenitic phase are there and ferritic phase are there. So austenitic ferritic. So in Sandvik grade, SAF 2304 is a lean duplex. SAF 2205, it is a standard duplex, or UNS number is 31803. So these two are basically standard duplex. Then SAF 2507 or 32750, it is a super duplex, and SAF 2906 or SAF 2707 HD, we call it as a hyper duplex. Here from the chemical compositions, few things it is you should notice that I'd request Mr. V.S. Rao if you could mute yourself. So if you see here, from lean duplex to super duplex and hyper duplex, most of the alloy elements are basically increasing. And there's a significant increase in chromium content, 22, 25, 27, or 29. There's an increase in nickel content from 4.5 to 5.5 to 7, hyperduplexes 6.5. Molybdenum content from 0.3 to 3.2, 4, and then 5. And very important alloy element is nitrogen. You can see is in lean duplex is only 0.1. Then in duplex is 0.18, then it increased to 0.3 and then 0.4. Okay, here based on these chemical compositions, I have put the PRN value. So you see here the SAF2304, which is a lean duplex, it has a PRN number is 26. Then 2205 is 35. Then 2707, which is super duplex, is 42. SAF and Xeron is basically both are commercially used super duplex. The UNS number is slightly different, where it is 32750 is SAF and Xeron is 32760. It is almost close. Then we have a hyper duplex, which is 49. Okay, and I put the formula here. We calculate based on the chromium, 3.3 times moly plus 0.5 tungsten and 16% nitrogen. Okay, here I want to stress more on this particular formula. You can see here the nitrogen is a very important alloying element in duplex family. Although the composition is only 0.5, 0.15 or 0.25, 0.23, but the relative effect on the pitting resistance is not only this much. It has a 16 times of effect. So remember this one, that nitrogen, even a 1% is lost during welding, the effect on the pitting resistance is not 1%, is effectively almost a 16% effect there. So that's why the nitrogen plays a very important role in any duplex family. Okay, so this is the solidification mechanism of duplex stainless steel. So what happened that specifically, let me explain in this, it is applicable for both base material as well as for the weld metal. So during welding, let's say, so when you do the welding, it goes to the liquid phase, which is here. And the liquid weld metal, it slowly cool down for over the time period. So what happened when it gets solidified? The first phase which form is basically ferrite or delta ferrite. And slowly over the time period, the delta ferrite, it transforms into austenite. And that's why it forms a duplex structure. Now, if you see here, the two very important factors plays how we are going to get a duplex structure. Number one, how much is our chromium and molybdenum in our base material or in the filler metal? Because chromium and molybdenum are basically ferrite stabilizers. So these two alloy elements, they always try to hold the structure into the ferritic phase. On the other hand, we have nickel and nitrogen, and these two are basically austenite stabilizers. So what these two alloy elements try, they try to pull in the structures from ferrite to austenite in the room temperature. So it is basically a synergetic effect of these four most critical alloy elements, and they try to fight each other so these ferrite stabilizers try to pull in the liquid weld metal to the room temperature in a ferritic structure. On the other hand, these two alloy elements, who are nickel and nitrogen, the austenite stabilizers, they try to pull in to the austenitic phase. And with this synchronization, the final structure, it gets solidified in between, and we get a duplex structure. This is one. Second very important factor is the cooling rate. as I mentioned, that solidification is basically a function of time. So it is in a liquid phase, then it transforms into delta ferrite or ferrite, and if we allow more time to solidify, it will transform into austenite. Now, if we don't allow the liquid well metal to be in the liquid state for a longer time period, or on the other hand, if it solidifies very quickly, which means from liquid it forms a ferrite, but it does not get enough time to transform into austenite. So we will get the end result of lot of ferrite and less austenite. On the other hand, if our cooling rate is slow, then we are allowing this liquid well metal to first form the delta ferrite or ferrite, and further it get enough time to transform into austenite. So the final product, we may get a lot of austenite and less amount of ferrite. So from our desired microstructure, although is theoretically 50% ferrite and 50% austenite, but depending on this alloy element as well as on the cooling rate, we sometimes can get 30% ferrite, we sometimes can get 50% ferrite, or even we can get sometimes 65-70% ferrite. So this is a role of us as a welding engineer to determine the alloy element as well as the cooling rate. But you see that a manufacturer, whether the base material tubes or plate, or a consumable manufacturer, they actually did a lot of R&D to optimize this kind of alloy element, although there's a range out there, but we try to optimize the range in such a way so that the microstructure try to be in a as perfect as possible. But during fabrication, depending on this cooling rate, it could vary. So later we'll discuss in more how it can be controlled on the desired microstructure on the duplex. So far, any questions? Anyone? Or should I continue?
There are about 3 to 4 questions, which at the moment, if you would like to take one or two of them, we can start with it.
Please. Yeah, sure. No problem.
So, Mr. Ayanar Akuswamy is asked that what is the minimum allowable ferrite percentage in hyperduplex, and how to achieve minimum 50% ferrite percentage in the weld of superduplex?
Okay, so this is a good question. So probably I should follow further slides where all these answers are there. So maybe that will be good.
Fair enough. I think we can proceed on that line. Thank you.
Okay. So this is a typical microstructure of a duplex material, where what I did, this is the base material structure. This particular microstructure you can see is the HO8, and this is a well metal structure. So it's basically well metal is a cast structure, whereas this base material, which is the grain orientations, are basically much more systematic compared to the well metal and heat affected zone. So when you talk about the general properties of the duplex, so why we are actually looking for a duplex structure? We know that austenitic stainless steel have few good properties, like impact properties is very good. It can used in even cryogenic applications until minus 196 degrees centigrade. But on the other hand, it does not have a good pitting resistance or corrosion property. When you talk about the ferritic stainless steel, it has a good strength, a better corrosion property, but it is inferior in terms of the toughness property. So if we combine these two structures together into one, so we can actually optimize both the mechanical properties as well as the corrosion properties. So that's what we are trying to achieve with this duplex structure. So it gives a very high strength and good ductility. And this high strength, higher the alloy element, which means higher the grade of the duplex family, from lean duplex to super duplex to super duplex to hyper duplex, the strength in terms of both tensile and yield strength is getting higher and higher. Okay, and at the same time, the corrosion resistance is also getting increased. So in general, the austenitic stainless steel and duplex family, duplex is always better in corrosion property. Just to take note that austenitic stainless steel 316L and lean duplex 2304 or LDX 2101, they have the similar corrosion property. And actually lean duplex was developed to replace stainless steel. Uh, there's an interesting background basically. If you see the austenitic stainless steel or 316L or 304L, this is basically 18-8 stainless steel. So we had a typically around 18% chromium and 8% nickel. And nickel is one of the most expensive alloy elements. So, and if you see the chemical composition of lean duplex, which is 2304, which is a 4%, 23% chromium and 4% nickel is there. So eventually we managed to make the half of the nickel content compared to stainless steel 316L. So the cost was drastically reduced. In the later stage, when the 316L became a commodity and the price dropped, so it became comparable. So lean duplex applications wise, what we expected, it will try to replace the 316L. It really didn't happen in the industry so far. Second, third point, it has a very good weldability. So there is no problem with the welding or joining of the duplex family. Of course, there are certain precautions need to take care. Very good resistance to stress corrosion cracking. It has a good fabrication property. It has a lower thermal expansion than austenitic stainless steel, and similar heat transfer as austenitic grades. Okay, so if you see here, it has given a typically the thermal expansion grade. It is important to see one more thing, that carbon steel and duplex stainless steel, the thermal expansion is almost same. So when you do a dissimilar welding, it has much more compatible even we compare to 316L. Yes, we do a lot of dissimilar joining with 316L to carbon steel, but if we compare with a carbon steel to duplex, it is much more suitable in comparison to 316L. Okay. These are the mechanical properties of austenitic stainless steel, specifically the yield strength. We see here the 316L around 200 MPa, whereas duplex is more than 400, super duplex is around 520, 550, and hyper duplex is more than 600, is around 650. So which shows that even you see this 254 SMO or 904L, super austenitic stainless steel is also lower in yield strength compared to any of the duplex family. So it really gives us a confidence on the yield strength, or when you do the design consideration of the yield strength, because we have a ferrite content, we have a nitrogen, and it actually give a smaller grain size. So that really help us to achieve such a high yield strength. Now, structural stability, which is very, very important for the duplex. And this is one of the real challenges during the fabrication for the duplex. These three alloy elements are actually, it is helpful. At the same time, it's also give a detrimental effect on the structural stability. So this structural stability decreases with the increasing amount of chromium, molybdenum, and tungsten. Later we have a graph, I'll show that. So what does it signifies? That higher the grades of duplex family, it is getting more and more challenging to get a stable structure. Stable structure in terms of without having intermetallic phases or undesired structure. Okay. The there is a sensitive temperature zone for austenitic phase for 900 to 1050. Then in duplex is basically more sensitive, around 600 to 1000. So probably have heard called sigma phase, chi phase, chi phases. These kind of detrimental phases actually form within this temperature zone. I will show this this later. So another important thing is basically austenitic ferritic stainless steel is also prone to 475 embrittlement. So this 475 embrittlement is very critical, and specifically I get lot of questions about the post-well heat treatment. So we'll explain later on that why it is challenging to do a conventional post-well heat treatment even in a cladding. Even we have a cladding, let's say duplex cladding with a carbon steel. So why we cannot do the post-well heat treatment, or what is the challenges of doing the post-well heat treatment or stress relieving at let's say 600 or 610 degrees centigrade. So this is one of the culprits basically. And influence of welding, why it is important, because sorry, the weldment is more sensitive than the base material, which is wrought material. And the base material, the reason is that normally for plate or pipe, we do a solution annealing operation at the end of the end of the forming. So where we can eliminate a lot of undesired structure or intermetallic phases, which is most of the cases is not possible in the well metal. If it's a small sample, probably we do this one, but imagine that we make a offshore structure or a big pressure vessels. It is almost impossible to do the solution annealing for such a critical component. So we need to basically control these two very important parameters during welding. One is heat input and second one is the interface temperature. So these two are basically our golden rule or thumb rule to get the absolute desired microstructure, and microstructures at the end of the day will give us the desired mechanical property. So this is very basically a little bit interesting graph. What is this graph says that, as I mentioned, that higher the alloy element is basically it is more susceptible to form this kind of intermetallic phases. So you see here that chromium, molybdenum, tungsten, silicon. So these are the alloy elements. It is basically there in the duplex. So higher the content of this kind of alloy element, the upper C curves, it moves to the left hand side, and this moly, tungsten, silicon, it also moves to the upward direction. So what does it mean? Let's assume that we are doing the welding, which is in a liquid phase, and it slowly cool down. So this is the function of time. So slowly cool down means it is more we give the time, higher the chance of it intersect of the C curve. And the moment it intersect the C curves, it has a higher potential to form this kind of intermetallic phases in general. Now, what does this alloy element signifies when it moves on the left hand side, which means we have lesser amount of notch or time to avoid this kind of intersection of the upper C curve. And when it goes in the upper arrow, which means even at a higher temperature, it has a potential that to form or intersect this C curve and to form this kind of intermetallic phases like chromium nitride, sigma phase, chi phase, chi phase. So secondary austenite is there. So this sigma is very important here. And chromium, molybdenum, copper, and tungsten, it has an effect on the lower C curve, which had the similar effect on moving to the left hand side and to bring down. So left hand side means it has the potential of intersection of this lower C curve, and so form this kind of alpha prime or pi phase. And at lower temperature, it could still possibility to form this thing. So in SAF or Sandvik austenitic ferritic grades, we believe, or our principle is that chromium is a important alloy element which is impossible to avoid. So we need that. Molybdenum is required, copper is required, nitrogen is also required. But we believe that without copper and tungsten, we can still achieve the desired PREN number, because this PREN number, you can see it's a function of chromium, is a function of molybdenum, is a function of nitrogen. So if we slightly increase the amount of nitrogen, it has a bigger effect of PREN number. Or if we slightly increase the chromium, it also has an effect on PREN number, or even on the molybdenum. So we really don't need to add tungsten, where the effect is really half of the tungsten. And tungsten content usually in the xenon type or 32770 grade has maximum 0.5%. So 0.5, even half of the 0.5 is here. So effect is not that significant. Rather, that alloy element has a bigger negative effect on the structural stability, and specifically when you are going for the higher grade of application like super duplex. So this is the function of the structural stability, where we try to avoid the alloy element like copper and tungsten in the base material as well as the filler metal, to get a more flexibility on the structural stability. Now, when you talk about the filler metal and base material, on the base material on the 32760, yes, it has a potential to form this kind of intermetallic phases. But as I mentioned, that when you manufacture the tubes or pipes or plates, the moment we do the solution annealing, so what is solution annealing? We heat the material around 1100 degrees centigrade. We homogenize and immediately do the water quenching, or in a faster quenching. So when you do the quenching, since these kind of intermetallic phases is a function of temperature and time, so it does not get enough time, because we are quenching in a water or in a coolant, which does not allow the time to form the intermetallic phases. So we can actually eliminate such kind of intermetallic phases in the base material like tubes, pipes or plate. But the challenge always remain on the well metal, which is absolutely difficult to go for the solution annealing. Okay, so that's a tips that try to avoid filler metal where it contains copper and tungsten. Okay, so this is basically the slide where I mentioned that different types of intermetallic phases, it forms in different temperature zones. So one of the most important here is basically sigma, which forms between 600 to 1000 degrees centigrade, and chi phase is 700 to 900 degrees centigrade. Chromium nitride is also interesting or most challenging undesired structure we get. All these are undesired and intermetallic phases, but the things which we most of the times we get is sigma phase, and which is absolutely brittle phase. Okay, so when you talk about the corrosion properties, one of the most common test is STM G48 or STM G48 method D, where we try to get the CPT, is called critical pitting temperature, or we try to do this method F, we try to measure the CCT, which is critical crevice temperature. Okay, so there's a formula here. It's called CPT is 2.5% chromium with 7.6% moly, 31.9 nitrogen, minus 41. So anyway, so the things which I want to show you here, the critical pitting temperature of 316L is around 20. It's basically around 20 to 25, basically it comes. Whereas lean duplex is, I told you that is almost same. But the other grades like duplex, super duplex, hyper duplex, you can see here the critical pitting temperature for hyper duplex is around 95 degrees centigrade, whereas the critical pitting temperature around 70 degrees centigrade. The SAF 2507, which is basically a super duplex, where critical pitting temperature around 80 degrees centigrade. Critical crevice temperature is around 50 degrees centigrade. Duplex is around 42, and critical crevice temperature is around 20. And when you compare with the 254 SMO, which is basically super austenitic stainless steel, which is also a very good pitting CPT is there around 80 degrees centigrade. So this is the alloy element I want you all of you to look at. This Inconel 625 or alloy 625. It has a very good critical pitting temperature, is around 85 degrees centigrade. But if you see here, the critical crevice temperature is only 33 or 35. So there are, I have seen questions or inquiries that can we weld duplex with a 625? I would say no. I'll also explain later that why no. Means don't always check only on the critical pitting temperature. Yes, it has a very good pitting resistance, but it has a very bad resistance on the crevice corrosion. So there's a major failure comes on the alloy 65 on the crevice, not on the pitting. And when a component goes to the seawater or in any application where chloride and all these things are there, it is not only comes on the pitting corrosion. So pitting and crevice both are equally important. So you see here that when you talk about the super duplex or hyper duplex, the difference between critical pitting temperature and crevice temperature is not that big. What we have in terms of the alloy 625. Okay, so this is a very interesting chart which I want all of you to listen carefully. So when we're talking about welding, which is the most critical part, so this is basically most desired road. If you remember on the previous some slides I mentioned that the final structure, it not only depends on the alloy element, it also depends on the cooling rate. So cooling rate, it also depends because, as I explained, that this kind of intermetallic phases is basically a function of temperature and time. Now, when we solidify, if we give more and more time, or if our cooling rate is slow, so cooling rate slow means there's a high potential that my liquid weld metal will stay on this kind of critical temperature zone, let's say 1000 degrees centigrade to 600 degrees centigrade to 500, 400, and slowly it will go to the room temperature. If the cooling rate is slow, it will stay for the longer time period in that critical temperature zone. If it stay for the longer time period, which means that it has a higher potential that it forms this kind of intermetallic phases, or it intersect the C curve and it forms the sigma phase. So slow cooling is not good because it has a high potential that it forms the sigma phase or intermetallic phases, any kind of sigma, chi, chi, or anything. On the other hand, if it's a very fast cooling rate, so what happened that it has a high chance that it forms chromium nitride. Instead of chromium oxide, it has a high potential that it forms chromium nitride. So duplex stainless steel, we need to optimize the cooling rate in such a way that it neither intersect the C curves, which forms the undesired sigma phase or chi phase or chi phase. Neither it has so fast cooling that it forms the chromium nitride. So if it forms chromium nitride, see the problems, we are depleting the chromium and we are also depleting the nitrogen. So our effective pitting resistance is depleting. Hence, that area is a potential of pitting attack. So chromium nitrate it forms. So it is a basically potential area to form the corrosion attack. And the sigma phase is the exactly same thing. It is an extremely high hardness and is brittle in nature and is a potential for a pitting corrosion. So we need to optimize the parameter in such a way that we get this kind of desired microstructure. So I just took some references from the some codes like NACE or API 582 DNV. You see here, they put the base material in a NACE. They say that it could be 35 to 65%. On the weld metal, it could be from 30 to 70%. API 582, they say between 40 to 60% base material, from 40 to 65% the heat effect zone, and weld metal it could be 30 to 65%. DNVGL 35 to 55% the base material, or on the HSZ and weld metal they said it could be 30 to 65%. For a welding for duplex, there are few things which are very critical, and that is basically one of the thumb rules how to avoid welding defects. So compared to stainless 316L, we recommend that try to go for a wider root gap. Wider root gap will help two things. One, the welder has access on the better root to penetrate, and another thing is that try to make the root pass or the weld metal by melting the filler metal more compared to the base material, because base material has a lower amount of nitrogen, and if we melt more on the base material, it will evaporate the nitrogen, so it will have a depletion of the nitrogen. So it will be one, it will have a less pitting resistance. At the same time, it will not have enough microstructural balance. So wider root gap is important. Root phase is also important. Root phase give a more access for the welder to melt on the filler metal, and wider the gap have the more access for the welder. So compared to stainless steel, we recommend to go for a wider root gap, should be a root phase and a more angle of the groove, so for the better access. Okay. Now, this is one of the most interesting and most important slide in terms of fabrication. As I explained that faster cooling is not desired, also slow cooling is not desired. Now, when you talk about the faster cooling or slow cooling, how to control in the weld metal? We have only two options. One is a heat input, and second is the interface temperature. How it influence? Higher the heat input or higher the interface temperature, you are basically increasing the temperature of the base material. Okay. Now, when the liquid weld metal cool down, so your gradient is low, so it has a potential that it will cool down slowly. If it cool down slowly, it will take more time in that critical temperature zone. If you stay for more time in the critical zone, it has a higher tendency to form the intermetallic phases. On the other hand, if your heat input is very low, which means your gradient is high, so the liquid weld metal will a tendency is to cool down much faster. If it cool down much faster, then two things will happen. One, it has a tendency to form the chromium nitride, and on the microstructure, if it cool down faster, you'll have a more ferrite, because liquid to delta ferrite, so ferrite will not have enough time to transform into austenite, so you'll get more ferrite. If you get more ferrite, what is the disadvantage? your toughness property will be down. Okay, you could have a slightly better corrosion property, but your toughness or impact property will be low. On the other hand, if it's slow cooling, you have enough time to transform from ferrite to austenite. So you'll have a more austenitic phase. So more austenitic phase will give a better toughness, but your strength will be low and your corrosion resistance will be low. So that's why it is basically a balancing act between the phases and also with the intermetallic phases. And based on our experience, these are the optimum or most recommended heat input zone or range and the maximum interface temperature for the grade like this lean duplex, duplex, super duplex, and hyper duplex. So you could take this one as a reference. With these references, there is a I would say 70% possibility that you will not get any kind of undesired microstructure. Why 70%? Because 30% plays a lot of other factors like welder skill, your environment, your cleanness, and a lot of other factors are there. So one of the nitrogen, okay, now the most commonly used processes, it could be actually used in any process, but the most commonly used processes are TIG, MIG, submerged welding is also used, but in a limited applications are there. I would say 60 to 60, and SMAW is also there. I would say like 60 to 65% applications are with the TIG process. There's another reason of TIG because most of the cases, the duplex family grades has a very high strain or high both tensile and yield strength. So the designer has a chance to reduce the thickness when they make the design calculation. Because of the high strength, the overall weight can be reduced and the thickness can be reduced. So we get most times is a thin material of duplex family. Specifically, if you go the higher the grade like super duplex or even hyper duplex, it will get usually the very thin material. So in a thin material, people used to go for a TIG process. If it's a thick material, people goes a combination of TIG and SMAW process. Sometimes they go with the SAW processes as well. So I will explain later on few case studies basically on that. So nitrogen is one of the most important alloy element, as well as it could be added to the shielding and purging gases. It is a strong austenite formation, or it helps to form the austenite. We need nitrogen for that. It gives the corrosion resistance, as I told you that it has a strong influence on the pitting resistance. And if it reduce only 1% nitrogen, the effect actually comes on the weld metal around 16%. So it gives basically a very important role on the corrosion resistance and of course on the mechanical properties. So normally we recommend for the GMAW process an argon plus 30% helium or 1 to 2% CO2, or in case of TIG, we recommend argon plus 2 to 3% of nitrogen as a shielding gas, and purging gas we can use 100% nitrogen or even 98% argon with 2% nitrogen. But little bit careful about 100% nitrogen, because if you use 100% nitrogen, there's a potential risk of having a very low amount of ferrite in the root. So it needs to be balanced basically. Why we need 2 to 3% of nitrogen specifically in the TIG process? Because when you do the TIG welding or tungsten inert gas welding, the filler metal which you have a nitrogen, let's say 0.23 or 0.25 in a super duplex, this nitrogen, it form a nitrogen gas N2 and it evaporate. So once it evaporate, it is basically, it reduce the nitrogen content on the weld metal. So we need to compensate that nitrogen amount to the shielding gas to get the desired corrosion properties and the microstructure. So this is a microstructure. It shows that if you use a shielding gas single argon, we got a excessive amount of ferrite. But if we add 2 to 3% of nitrogen, we got a good balance of ferrite and austenite, because this nitrogen is basically austenite former, and it gives a quite good amount of austenite in the microstructure. Okay, so welding with the purging of of the gases. So sorry. So generally, single argon is not recommended, especially for the high alert duplex material. I have explained that, because if you use a argon, so is a potential of having an excessive amount of ferrite and less amount of austenite. So we need a desired microstructure. Argon lead to loss of the nitrogen on the surface of the root bed to the parent metal 1 to 2 millimeter from the fusion line. This is what I explained just now. So argon with 2 to 3% nitrogen or 100% nitrogen can be used. So I put with caution, as I told you that nitrogen, if you use, it has a good potential on the corrosion property, but make sure that we have the risk of having even less than 30% of ferrite. So we can get like 25% of ferrite, which is also not good. Yeah, so this is what I explained, that thin skin of austenite about 20 micron thin forms the surface on the root bed fusion line, enhancing the corrosion resistance. So okay, so these are basically the recommended grades on Exerton. So for the lean duplex and duplex, we are actually recommending the for TIG the duplex grade. For GMAW is also duplex. We recommend specifically for GMAW with the addition of silicon. So silicon actually gives us a good fluidity on the liquid weld metal, and if you do the MIG welding with a greater control of the fluidity, it really gives a very nice weld bed. For SMAW, we recommend 2209, actually 2209, 3LR or LB. LR is the LB is a basic and rutile type. So LB gives better impact property, but it does not, the cosmetic look does not is not nice. LR has a nice cosmetic look, but it does not give a better impact property. And submerged welding, we go for the 22H3L with the 15W fluxes. For super duplex, we recommend super duplex 2510-4L, and hyper duplex we recommend 2775L, which is basically a hyper duplex in nature. Okay, so this pitting corrosion in terms of welding, pitting corrosion with the base material versus weld metal, this is important, because you see the base material, parent metal have always a high amount of CPT, as I explained, because they do the solution handling operation. Whereas in terms of welding, it's basically as welded or cast structure, which is a lower amount of pitting resistance. So when you talk about the hyper duplex, we have around 55 minimum to 75 maximum. In terms of super duplex, is around 80 for a base material, but when you talk about the weld metal, is coming from 42 to 60. Duplex is around and for 35. Okay, just to ask, I think I'm running out of time, correct? Should I make it much faster?
Yeah, I think you can move little faster.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will explain this one. So there are few corrosion and weld metal. I think next slides will be much easy to. Okay, so you see here the slag residues. So beside it gives a bad cosmetic appearance, a slag residue may act as a crevice former. So please make sure that when you do the welding, you should not keep any kind of slags. It's really bad for the corrosion. It has a high potential that it would create a crevice corrosion. Spatter is very dangerous. It not only gives a bad appearance, it is absolutely a potential area of pitting corrosion. So any kind of spatter, it should be removed. It is not desired in any kind of duplex material. Arc strike, it is really dangerous. It is basically the initiation point for the local corrosion, And when you do the arc strike, it is basically gives instant melting and very high cooling rate. So because of the very high cooling rate, it contains a lot of chromium nitride. As I told you, if you have a faster cooling rate, it forms the chromium nitride. So it is highly ferritic because it does not have a time to transform into austenite. It has lot of delta ferrite, at the same time contain lot of chromium nitride. So it is dangerous. Oxides, it is absolutely undesired because oxide gives higher the oxide content, it gives a lower the corrosion resistance. So please remove the oxide layers. It either could be pickling and patching. This is the best thing. I'll explain later. Also, we have a chart. Grinding, buffing, wire brushing, or blasting. Inside the tube, good root shielding is basically desired. So this is a good example that welding of a coil tube is an umbilical tubing of the hyper duplex 3207 HT. We found entire well metal. We got the point of enter concentration corrosion in the fusion line of the slope down area. This was actually happening at the 70 degrees centigrade, although it is very high temperature. Pitting at the fusion line. So after slope down area, the fusion line prone to be a pitting. So the weld root should be a right contour. Otherwise, it has a high tendency to have a fusion line pitting. Heat effect zone, which is very critical. It could form because of the chromium nitride formation. So we need to optimize our parameter. So it looks like that if we cut. So it forms the pitting at the head, HZ. For information, the pitting occurs, I would say 80% at the root area and remaining 20% either in the cap or inside. So this is the most dangerous area is inside. This is very important. Why super duplex we should not weld with the Inconel 625 or ENICR MO3. The welding of duplex stainless steel with a nickel-based filler wire is not recommended by Exciton unless it is a dissimilar joint between duplex and high-alloyed austenitic stainless steel. Due to fusion of nitrogen in the austenitic weld metal, the fusion line get fully ferritic, which is dangerous. It has a potential of a selective attack on the fusion line, and also there's a potential of a knife line attack. Reason can be diffusion of the important alloy elements, that is nitrogen in the duplex stainless steel, leaving an almost full austenitic fusion line. So this is the area where we could got, or it's called UMZ, or like HZ is a heat effector zone. It's called UMZ. It's called unmixed zone. So it does not mix properly. So we recommend not to use the Inconel 625 or nickel based, basically any filler wire. So this is the important post weld treatment. I got several times a question that we followed everything, all the welding was good, looks nice, but if we keep in our workshop or outside, within 1 month or even 15 days, we can find a brown color on the ripple. Why it happened? So it is basically a potential area of corrosion. Although you take care of all the right filler metal, right parameter, but if you don't do this post weld cleaning or post weld treatment, what is post weld treatment is basically when you do the welding, you are destroying the chromium oxide layers with a lot of undesired things. So we should make sure that we remove all the undesired oxide formation layers with a proper cleaning. So pickling and passivation is the most important thing, which gives the maximum potential. So we do the acid cleaning, then we neutralize the acid. So naturally the chromium present on the well metal or base material, it gets in contact with the oxygen in the atmosphere and form the stable passive layer of the chromium oxide. Now the number 4 is brassing. Brassing could also be done, but it is not as good. So brassing, then we have a wire brass, then grinding and pickling and passivation. So we recommend if you want to get a highest pitting potential, you should go for a acid pickling and passivation. Okay, so this is an important slide. Sometimes we got a question that can we go for a postal heat treatment? We have a carbon steel cladded with a duplex, super duplex. So can you do the stress relieving? Try to avoid stress relieving, and if it's really required, definitely is not at all recommended at 600 degrees centigrade. You see this one, if it can intersect the C curves or even the high potential of 475-degree embrittlement, anything above that is absolutely not recommended. Higher it goes, the ferrite phase has the potential to transform into sigma phase. So definitely no. If it is really, really required, then it can be done at a lower temperature, let's say 300 degrees centigrade, for a longer time period. So which will avoid such kind of C curves, and we can actually eliminate the residual stresses. So I'll try to show a few of the pictures where lean duplex, duplex, super duplex, or hyper duplex can be used. Paper and pulp industry, we can use this one where we use either lean duplex is very much used, or sometimes the duplex. Offshore pipeline application is a huge application of duplex, super duplex, and now on hyper duplex. This is a spiral bridge in Singapore. You can see this. This entire bridge was constructed with lean duplex, LDX 2101 basically, and SAP 2304. Chemical and petrochemical industry, yes, absolutely. There's a lot of application of duplex. Tanks, nowadays we can see the tanks with a lean duplex or even duplex. Umbilical tubing, a huge application of hyper duplex. It goes in a very deep sea, highly corrosive in nature. So we need a hyper duplex of that. Hydrometallurgical plants like process piping, heat exchanger, reactors and tanks, agitator and wafer, we have a application of the duplex family. Offshore oil and gas, manifold, process piping, seawater, fine food system, heat exchangers, the heat exchangers. We have this duplex, even hyper duplex, super duplex, it can be used. Desalination has a lot of application of the hyper duplex, the lean duplex. Somebody raise hand. Should we take this question or I should continue?
Continue, sir. We will take questions at the
Okay,
end.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Vignesh has already mentioned on the chat as well, so we'll take it up at the end.
Okay, thank you. For desalination on the membrane rack, energy recovery, HP piping, there's a high application of lean duplex or super duplex. Okay, so since I'm going a little bit fast, probably because of the running out of time. So here are a few case studies which I have experienced over the time period. So this is one of the most challenging probably case study I have seen, or is a real life problem. And this happened actually one of the top-notch shipbuilding company. I'll not mention the name. They are in the top 5 shipbuilding company in the world. So what happened? They were using 31803, which is a duplex material with a thickness of 64 millimeter, which is a quite high thickness. You can see the macro structures here. The process was used SAW. The failure it found during the bend test and impact testing. So you see here, this is a 64 millimeter base material super duplex, which is welded with the submerged process, 2/3, 1/3 configuration. And when they do the bend test, 180 degree, you see that it completely broke. So when they do the analysis, we found that there's a 475 embrittlement was there. There is a carbide precipitation was there. There is a hot crack was also there, and also the sigma phase. So you see here the structure. This structure shows that the fracture of the heat affected zone 475 embrittlement. Okay, so these are basically we did a same on that, and we found this one. We also found that there's a carbide, basically chromium nitride or M23C6 also formed in the grain boundary on the well metal as well as heat affected zone, which basically damage the grain boundary in the well metal and heat affected zone. This is the area. Hot cracking of the shiny region from the crack on the side bend specimen. So we did ACM, and we found that the shiny things are basically the evidence of the hot cracking. And we also did some chemical analysis with and we found there's a sulfur contamination of the hot crack region. And last, we also found a sigma phase. You can see this is the sigma phase on the edge of the crack and the sulfur surrounding formation. So we actually, it is a quite detailed case study. We did it. So in summary, what we found, the number one, what the mistake was done. It was a 64 millimeter thick plate. Okay. So when they did in the fabrication yard, they forgot to clean properly the bevels. So we recommend to clean the bevel properly with the acetone. So what this cleaning, so there's a lot of undesired grease was there, cutting marks were there, some sulfur content. Basically, this when it did start welding, it got burned, and when it got burned, it tried to absorb the moistures and sulfur. So cleaning was very important, and because they did a submerged process, when they start the welding, because of the high thickness, it has a very high cooling rate. So when they do the high cooling rate, it basically form the chromium nitride. Okay, but over the time period when they're going further and further deposition, so the cooling rate was getting slower and slower. And when the cooling rate was getting slower and slower, it start form the sigma phase because the cooling rate was slow. So what was the mistake there? They were trying to measure the interface temperature with a laser. Okay, and for duplex family, measuring temperature or interface temperature with a laser is absolutely wrong because it gives a huge amount of deflection and it absolutely gives a wrong reading. So they were measuring the interface temperature was below 150 degrees centigrade, but eventually when we try to make a simulation and test with a contact type thermometer, we found the real temperatures were around 300 degrees centigrade, 250 to 300 degrees centigrade. And that gives an extreme slow cooling rate, and hence is this kind of microstructure. And maintaining welding sequence is also very important because with such a high thickness and because of the slower cooling rate or the coefficient of thermal expansion and contraction, it actually they try to go for a one pass complete welding and they reverse it and then try to weld the remaining. So it create a lot of residual stresses on the weld joint, and it basically when they do the bending, it just it's just a breakout. So there are several factors which actually implemented or happened in this thing. Yes, it was a fantastic case study for us, but it was really a nightmare for the fabricator. So I had to spend a couple of weeks there to basically rectify this particular problem. Second case study, okay, just for information, I'm trying to show the higher thickness grades because which is rare probably, but it has the most amount of challenges. The thin material, probably over the time period, people has gained a lot of experience to optimize the parameter, but the real challenges comes on the higher thickness. So this is another challenging thing which I have done in another big oil and gas companies in Asia. I can mention the name, but this is one of the big oil and gas company basically. So the base material you see it is a duplex, and imagine the thickness of 80 millimeter. It is a huge thickness material. It was basically a pipe to flange welding was there. So you can see here the welding was done 20 millimeter with TIG and 54. I'll tell you this is the stories, quite interesting stories there. and it was supposed to done a 60 millimeter with the SMAW process. So the challenge was in this particular grade or the welding was the grinding. So initially we thought we'll go for the only root pass with a TIG rod super duplex to protect the root, and followed by the SMAW process. Then we found the welder can't go at the root side because of the high thickness. So the torch will not go. The torch angle is not suitable. So it will form a very high arc length and very high potential that it will not melt the weld metal. So we decided let's do the 20 millimeter with the TIG. So we did a 20 millimeter TIG. And after we did the 20 millimeter TIG, so we found that now we have enough access with our electrode. But when we try to start the welding of the electrode, and especially because of the impact requirement, we have to use the LB or basic type electrode, where the slag detachment is very challenging. So we try to start the welding, but we found that the grinding disc or grinding wheel is absolutely impossible to go there. So what we did, we do further welding of another 6 millimeter, which is 26, and remaining 54 millimeter with the SMAW process, so that the grinding disc also go inside. So this is a lesson learned, that when we try to design a welding process, we have to also take care of the parameters, like whether we can have the enough access of our welder to weld on the root side, or enough access of our grinding disc, because we might need to do the grinding. So this is thing.
Yeah, Sukhmal, just out of curiosity, what was the groove angle at the bottom and at the top?
Yeah, so this is what another thing was there. So it was basically 80 millimeter thick. So here on the bottom, it was the groove angle was around 70 degree, but more we go up, you imagine that it was quite wider. So here we try to make it around 35.
35 on one side or included 35?
The included was 35, just to make it a narrower.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this is the hardness. So hardness failure is interesting. The base material was duplex, where actually our recommendation was to go only the root with the super duplex, and followed by the duplex TIG, and then followed by the duplex electrode. But the end customer, they should know we want to make sure that our we should not have any kind of corrosion failure. So what they did, they do the entire TIG welding with the super duplex, and remaining duplex was the electrode with the duplex. So it really passed the corrosion test, but there's a massive failure happen on the heat on the hardness. You see here the number E, which is the root side 1.5 to 2 millimeter from here. The point on the weld metal, it goes 365, 364 HRC, and heat effector zone was 353. Where the parent metal has also got affected, we got 342. So by using this super duplex, and also with the multiple amount of layer, and with the slow heat treatment, we got basically some sort of secondary austenites there, and the hardness was very high. So when the hardness was very high, so naturally the impact value, it fell on the root side. So this is also a lesson learned from us, that giving a higher alloyed filler metal, it is not always necessary. Yes, it gives the protection on the corrosion property, but at the same time, it could you might also have to sacrifice your hardness. So that's where it is basically like a juggling for any duplex family. What you want, what is your desired requirement on the project? So depending on the requirement of the project, we should make a balance of on the parameters and selection of the filler metal. The third case study, it is basically thin material tubes welding. I try to show the most common failures at the root side. You can see this the pictures are basically G48 method A, the pitting corrosion test, where we found pits on the root side. These two samples specifically got pit because of the root, the purging gas and the shielding gas, they actually use single argon. So because we do not have enough amount of nitrogen, so when you do the testing, so we found the pitting corrosion. So we recommend basically to go for a 2 to 3% of nitrogen to avoid such kind of pitting. You see, the welder skill was really fantastic. It's such a new, nice weld bit, but because of the lack of nitrogen, it got a pitting. Second one is a good example that it's really a terrible skill of a welder. So please remember that when you do the welding with for the duplex family, try to go for a skilled welder. This kind of weld route is a high potential of a pitting. We can go for all kind of precautions like proper shielding gas, proper filler metal. But if this kind of weld bit is appearance in the root side, these are the areas. These areas are basically the stress risers or sharp edge and very high potential of the pitting. This one is also a potential risk. Why I'm trying to show this one? You can see the heat tints are there. So heat tint is basically means the amount of oxygen content in the root side is high. So oxygen content higher means is a lower amount of pitting resistance. So we recommend for the root side, the maximum oxygen content should be 50 ppm. So 50 and below is always better. So from the heat tint, you itself can see that if it's a much darker, which means your oxygen content was high or high heat input was there, or it get burned. So oxygen monitor is very essential for a welding of any duplex material. So summary is mechanical strength for super duplex is higher, almost 50% than standard duplex. I told you that higher the alloy element, higher the strength. Mechanical strength is 25% higher in hyper duplex than even super duplex. Super duplex has a twice the pitting resistance temperature compared to duplex stainless steel. The welding parameters are very critical. Welding parameters in terms of interface temperature and heat input, plus all the other parameters. Post weld cleaning is very important, as I mentioned that do the pickling and passivation. Try to be clean, and the welder skill is also very important. Also, I mentioned that there are several applications are there in the industry for the duplex family, and there are lot of more applications are coming day by day, because now from lean we now come to duplex, then super duplex, and now hyper duplex, and I believe there will be a lot of other developments are all ongoing, and lot of new applications are coming. Even I heard that in India, bridge is coming probably will made of duplex, to avoid the corrosion environment. So that's basically. I'm sorry that I actually is running out of time. I took a longer time period for all of you. So now it is open for a Q&A. So bottom, I have given my contacts, also my LinkedIn profile. You can visit my LinkedIn profile. You can also reach to my personal email address. So I'll try to answer as much as possible, whatever I know. If the time does not permit today, so you're always free to ask any questions. So now is a Q&A session. So please.
Dr. Krishnan, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Sukuman, I must thank you really for a very insightful presentation. And as we thought, it was very intriguing, and there are a lot of questions on the chat, which we have forwarded to Dr. Krishnan. Maybe Dr. Krishnan, you can take some of them with Mr. Sukamal as time permits, and then we can take it forward.
Yeah. So I can see a very interesting question on the heat treatment part. Sukmal, the question is, in case of duplex lined equipment, is weld overlay preferred or cladding plate? That is the first question. And there is one more question attached to that. If formed heads base plate requires SR after forming, can duplex cladded formed heads undergo SR? If so, at what temperature?
Okay, so I think form head, yes, that is definitely it is widely used in the industry. Now, as I mentioned that there are few options are there to restore back the cladding. One, okay, when you do this heat treatment, the base material, it is in a quite stable condition. So normally what we do, we can buy a exclusive bonded cladded plate. Okay, so exclusive bonded cladded plate has a quite stable structures are there. So we can form the head, we can join the head, we can do the welding of the carbon steel area, and we can do a heat treatment as a normal heat treatment as per the desired temperature. Now, and after that, we can actually restore back the cladding portion. Because of the very thin deposition of the cladding, could be 3 to 4 millimeter or 5 millimeter or maximum 6 millimeter, it will not create that amount of stresses on the weld joint that it will crack further. So it is always better to avoid a post-weld heat treatment after finishing the clad restoration. If the situation comes that it has no other option left, that you have to do the post-weld heat treatment after welding, then the only things left is basically, as I mentioned, at a very low temperature, around 300 degrees centigrade for a longer time period, maybe 10 to 12 hours soaking. So at that soaking temperature and time, there will not be any detrimental changes will happen. Or I think section 8 division 1 is allowed that you can do the stress relieving at a lower temperature with a longer soaking time period. So that basically could help. So it needs to study what is our requirement. But yes, always it is better to avoid a post-weld heat treatment as much as possible for any kind of duplex welding.
Yeah, thanks, Ukmal. And there is one more interesting question which you know all the fabricators have always in mind. Is GMAW recommended for duplex or super duplex? And is there any case study or any attempt has been done onto that part?
Sorry, what is the process? GMAW?
MIG-BANG.
MIG-BANG. Yes, absolutely. So we recommend we do lot of MIG welding, especially we recommend on the silicon content, silicon grade, whether Miss 2283 LSI or 2510-4 LSI. So far we have not come across such kind of failure. At least I have not come across any such kind of failures for MIG welding. Means if we have some specific problem, we could probably address on that and we can work out on that.
So is there any special recommendation one should address while going with GMAW?
See, for the duplex family, whether it's a duplex or super duplex, or even I did a hyper duplex basically, cladding with hyper duplex with automatic or semi-automatic process. So the basic thumb rule is always remain same. So our heat input and our interpost temperature. So when we do the cladding specifically, and we know that we're cladding on top of a carbon steel where the heat sink is very fast. So depending on the heat sink, we know that the thermal dissipation for carbon steel is very quick. So we might increase our heat input, we might increase our interpost temperature, knowing the fact that my base material is not duplex. So my first base material is basically carbon steel where the heat sink is fast. So if the heat sink is fast, if we just follow the standard, let's say 100 degrees centigrade interpost temperature or 0.8 kilojoule, it may not be applicable. So we may go up to 2 kilojoule for the heat input, or we may go interpost temperature, I do not know, maybe 200 or 250 degrees centigrade at the beginning on the first layer, so that even on the faster cooling, my heat input and interpost temperature give me the balance during the solidification, so that we can get a desired microstructure. So that is one of the trials we could get, because that's how we balance the structure.
Yeah, thanks, Ugmal. And now another question is, what is minimum allowable ferrite percentage in hyperduplex?
So in hyperduplex, any duplex family, the requirement is basically, like as I mentioned, that there's a codes and standards are there. So if I take a API 582, which is one of the most commonly used codes, where the well metal from 30 to 65% ferrite is there. So base metal, we don't need to worry, because base metal hyperduplex is one of the most balanced structure. I think it's almost 50%. The challenge comes on the well metal, but we have done several welding on hyperduplex. Hyperduplex is always in a higher side of the ferrite, but still it goes, I think it can be managed within the like 45 to 65% ferrite. So there's no problem on that.
Yeah, thank you. And there is also a question on the casting. How much nitrogen preferred for casting process? So you have any clues on that?
Sorry, how much nitrogen
Is preferred in case of casting?
So casting is basically okay. So in a casting, so in the raw material or the base material is basically has a lower amount of nitrogen compared to filler metal, but there is, if you are talking about, let's say UNS 31803, so you will have like 0.08 to 0.1, 0.2% of nitrogen. So the nitrogen content will be within that. So the nitrogen content usually it happens like 0.14 to 0.18% typically.
Okay. And I can see one more question on SAW. So the question is, while maintaining a heat input below 1.5 to 2 M, I think it is between 1.5 and 2. It results into number of porosities throughout the well. Any comment on this?
Sorry, one more. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, you're telling the heat input is maintained between 1.5 and 2, and while welding, a lot of porosities are seen. I don't think it has anything to do with the heat input. So
No,
this
okay.
has to be with the process, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So the porosity, it could be several reasons. Okay, one, you have to really check the flux. Okay, first let's start with the material first. So if it is a super duplex material, so remember that the super duplex, or if you go even hyper duplex, is much severe, because we have a lot of amount of nitrogen out there on the base material as well as on the filler metal, and nitrogen is desired. We need to balance the corrosion property as well as the microstructure. So this nitrogen, which is present on the base material as well as on the filler metal, during the welding, it form a nitrogen gas, and this nitrogen gas will definitely evaporate. So nitrogen, when it gets evaporated, it will show the porosities, and this is absolutely common. And we have to just make sure that the porosity level within the acceptable range as per ASME. I think ASME, there is a chart of the RT film, the acceptable limit of porosity charts are there. If it's a duplex, the chances of porosity is less because of the less amount of nitrogen. So the grades which has a higher amount of nitrogen has a higher possibility of porosities. But we have to just make sure that the porosities are within the acceptable range. Second thing which you need to take care is the flux. Now, if your flux, when you do the recycling, be careful of the recycling. A flux content are different type of grain sizes. If you have a more coarser grain, which means when it cover on the well metal, it between the pores, it has a lot of gap, which helps the gas to come out. So if the coarse grain flux you're using, you will get a lower porosity. But there is another risk is there. If you have a lot of coarse grain, it may also happen the atmospheric nitrogen comes in contact with the liquid well metal or well pool. On the other hand, if you have a, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So on the other hand, if you have a very fine grain of flux, so the fine grain will protect the well metal from the atmospheric oxygen or nitrogen, but at the same time it will not get any escape path for the nitrogen or the gas during the welding, and it will eventually create a porosity. So you need to actually optimize the grain size. Optimizing grain size is basically normally it's supplied by the supplier, but if you recycle more, there's a high potential because the bonding it got disbonded, the additives is disbonded, and it got more and more fine particle, and more fine particle it is has a high potential to have a porosity, especially on the nitrogen porosity.
Yes, Sumal, there is a related question on FCAW. So similar experience of porosity has been experienced with flux code as well. So how is your experience with flux code for duplex and higher grades?
Honestly, flux code application in duplex or super duplex is limited. The reason is basically a high amount of oxygen content. You know that the process which have a higher amount of oxygen content, it gives a lower corrosion property or mechanical property. So yes, there is a available of flux code consumables are there, but on the flux code, it has the exactly same thing happen, that one is have higher amount of oxygen, and second thing is that in the flux core also we have a nitrogen in the form of a nitrides or ferronitrides. So when it get burned, so this nitrogen actually get evaporated. So if you're doing flux core welding, try to maintain go for the spray type of arc with a shorter arc, where you can basically minimize the porosities. But we need to check, because how the flux core are there, whether the flux in the core has absorbed any moisture or not, or there's any was proper shielding during the flux core welding, or the gas flow rate, whether they make some turbulence there or not. So these kind of things we need to do, because, and also try to make sure that we have enough diffuser. Sometimes we don't add the diffuser on the torch nozzle. So when you don't do the diffuser, although we see the gas flow rate is high, but it does not basically cover properly. So diffuser give a proper diffuse in a proper way on the weld metal. So I have seen that due to this diffuser also, it sometimes create a problem.
Yeah, another interesting question, being being a fabricator, a lot of people face this issue. See, is PWH recommended for 2205 weld overlay on carbon steel? Because in the fabrication, you many of the times you come across a situation where you need to subject this steel to PWH.
Yeah, and I think this is what. Yeah, sorry,
yeah.
please go ahead.
And if yes, what is the recommended temperature?
Yeah, I think I just now discussed about this one. Just now you asked the question about the cladding.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, that if it is two things can be done. If you have a cladded vessel, you can do the joining with the carbon steel portion, and you go for the postal heat treatment, and then you do the clad restoration. So clad restoration will be very thin layer, probably 3, 4, 5 millimeter, which does not generate any kind of stresses that you will have a further effect. So we don't need a postal heat treatment. See, if it is really undesired, if has no choice that we really need to have a postal heat treatment, at that time you have to do at a very low temperature, around 300 degrees centigrade, for a longer time period.
Yeah. Sukumal, the question is slightly different. Yeah. This is not a clad restoration per se. Suppose I have a case where I need to have an overlay of duplex on my entire tube sheet face.
Okay.
So in that case, how to handle?
Okay, there is a interesting thing. If we see the ASME or even ASME recommendations, so what they say that we determine the post-well heat treatment temperature and the soaking time depending on the thickness of the weld metal. Correct?
Right.
Now, deposit of the weld metal thickness, what do you do? Either if it's a fillet, then throat thickness of the fillet. If it's a groove, then the groove angle. If it's a groove plus fillet, then groove groove depth plus the throat thickness, and that
Correct.
actually determines this thing. Now you see, when we are doing a tube sheet cladding, basically, so what is the effective weld deposit? Probably 3 millimeter, 4 millimeter, 5 millimeter. Does it really require a 4-5 millimeter deposited weld metal postal heat treatment? I would say no. Two things. One, it has a and especially if you do the strip cladding, it is mass uniformly distributed heat. And although there is a so-called undefined heat input calculations are there, where we should also divide the width of the strip. So if you see the per unit area, we have a very bare minimum amount of heat input are there, which means the energy going to the material is very low. So the stress generated is very bare minimum, and 4-5 millimeter, 6 millimeter weld metal, even in the carbon steel, does not require any postal heat treatment. So to me, your tube sheet is 100 millimeter, 150 millimeter thick, and you're depositing only 4-5 millimeter cladding. It does not generate such amount of stresses which really require a postal heat treatment. Now,
See,
sometimes
yeah.
client really insist, so they don't
Right,
go by
right,
this kind of formulation. So if client really insists in this way, so the way how I look, if it's really need to do the strip cladding on the tube sheet, then it had to do the post heat treatment at a very low temperature and for a longer soaking time. So that is the only options are there.
See, Sukmal, there is a different thought for this.
Hmm.
Okay. See, sometimes the tube sheet can even be a P4. So generally, whenever you have to do a strip cladding onto the tube sheet, first you do the barrier layer either with a 309 LO or 309 LMO. Okay, so to do the barrier layer subject to PWHT, then you do the subsequent layer. So that is one way to tackle this.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm saying that if you do the buffer layer with 309 MOL or this one, definitely we can do the post treatment. But in case of duplex, if you want to reduce the thickness, because duplex is allowed to directly apply on the base material, so it does not have any effect on that. So yes, so if you really insist on the post heat treatment, yes, that is actually one of the options. Do the buffer layer like 309 MOL, do the post heat treatment, and then deposit the final layer of duplex.
Yeah. So I will take one more last question. I think that is on the corrosion nails. That is one of your pet topics. See, it says the NACE 2015 deleted hardness requirement for DSS. What will be then the recommended hardness limit from your point of view?
See, basically, see, NACE or any codes and standards, they're very smart, basically. Okay. So we don't need to be so happy that, okay, NACE has now removed the hardness of what, any hardness could be there. See, they are basically tightening from other angle. There could be a tightening for your ferrite content. There could be a tightening from your impact property, because you know that if your hardness is high, your impact property will also be low. So they might have given you a most stringent hardness property. Okay. So in general, one of the mostly used code, especially on the oil and gas, probably one of the highly used duplex grade or stringent requirement, where they go for the duplex at up to 320 HV10, and for super duplex they until go 350 HV10. So 320 or 310 HV10 for a duplex is a quite decent hardness range, I would say, to maintain all kind of properties like corrosion property or impact property.
Okay, so I am taking the last question of the day. I think there are a few more left, which we will pass it over to you, which you can reply over mail.
Yeah,
so the
sure.
last question for this session is on. It says is what to do when all specification of duplex are met as per ASTM standard, but later on it failed in ASTM A93 method C test. So do you have any experience on that?
See,
ASTM A923 method C.
so 923 methods is basically where the requirement is more stringent, like I think 10 MDD is the weight loss they require. So 10 MDD is nothing but 1 gram per meter square. DD means per day in 24 hours. Whereas G48 method A, which gives a 4 gram per meter square, which is also we do in a 24 hours or 72 hours. So 923 method C is one of the most stringent requirements. So if 923 method C is your requirement, so definitely you have to meet the requirement. And yes, 923 method C it could fail because, as I mentioned, that it is much stringent requirement because the acceptance criteria is 10 MDD only, which is 1 gram per meter square for 24 hours, compared to the most commonly used acceptance criteria is ASTM G48 method A, where we check the 4 gram per meter square. So yeah, exactly. So 923 is the, when you compare all the codes, you have to follow the most stringent one. So 923 methods is the most stringent one, and you need to follow that.
Yeah, thank you, Sukmal. I now invite Nimesh.
Yes, sir. I think, Sukumalji, I think a brilliant lecture, and that too on Teachers' Day, nothing better than sharing knowledge. And everybody was really, really participative in the Q&A, and we could see the excitement in the duplex opportunities that are upcoming in the Indian space. It looks like duplex is where the next set of growth is headed. And
Absolutely.
your practical insights have really, really been very useful to all. And I'm sure sooner or later you'll hear again from us for another session on similar
No
lines.
problem at all. Probably in the next session, instead of a general discussion, I might focus on case studies, specific case studies, where probably it will be quite interesting because I have some experience of doing even super duplex of 80 millimeter thick, which probably
I think that
I'm one of the
would be
few
great.
in the world who have experienced that.
So
Yeah,
maybe
we will,
Dr. Krishnan, you can take up
yeah, we will. Yeah, we will definitely plan one on that,
yeah.
and that will be really, really useful for all of us.
And to on a closing note, we would, if with your permission, Sukumalji, if you like, can we share the recording and the presentation everybody's been asking for?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. I will send the presentation in PPT format to all of you,
Sure.
and
So
you can
what we
share.
will do for the benefit those who have registered, we will share it via your email address.
Yeah.
And to the rest, you can look up our LinkedIn page and stay posted on that. We will maybe post a link on the video there. And so you could be in touch with us through that and through the email IDs. I have shared the forms of the membership. In case you are interested, it would be nice to fill it in and send it across so that you can be in touch, and more such lectures are on the way. Uh, Thank you everybody for removing so much of your time on a Saturday evening. And thank you Sukamalji for a brilliant talk and
Yeah,
Thank
showing us the opportunities
yeah,
ahead.
Nimesh,
Yeah,
I invite Mr. Malge, Secretary of the Mumbai branch,
yes,
to give a vote of thanks.
just a second. Mr. Malgi, can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
You have one. Okay. Good evening. Very nice to see you all virtually on the screen from different locations. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. On behalf of Indian Institute of Welding India, Mumbai branch, I thank Mr. Sukumal Naskar, Product Manager, Southeast Asia, Exton, for having delivered a very informative and educative talk on welding of duplex family, opportunities, challenges. He covered from the development of duplex stainless steels, metallurgy of duplex, effect of cooling rates, welding joint preparation, shielding gases, and welding processes, and concluded with the case studies. It was a fantastic and brilliant talk. Once again, my thanks to Mr. Sukumal. I think the participants have been benefited by this. I thank all the participants for their overwhelming response in attending this talk. I thank Dr. Krishnan, Mr. Nimesh, Mr. Vishal Mehta, Mr. Abhishek Vyas, and other team members for organizing the uh, today's webinar talk. I also extend my vote of, vote of thanks to all MC members of Mumbai branch. In consultation with our Mumbai branch and technical committee, we shall be organizing few more technical lectures like this, and we will invite you all. Thanks once again. Thanks for your precious time devoted for that talk. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
all.
much. Thanks to Team IW Mumbai branch. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.